Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about TTRPGs. First up for TTRPG today, we have still the Stone Creek coffee mug. Again, one of my favorite mugs. It's good and wide. And then inside of it, we have the vanilla black chai from Bigelow. This is a really, really great, sort of spicy, not too spicy, kind of smooth with the vanilla chai tea. I'm not even a huge chai fan necessarily, but it is a really nice sort of in between for it again. So if you're interested, check that out. But we're getting back into what we're talking about today, which is, of course, we're still going through Kids on Bikes. This here game by Renegade Studios, as well as Infectious Play Publishing and Hunters Entertainment, the 2019 Annie Award-winning game. I realized that I just sort of skipped through all of these, and I just talked about Renegade before. All of them had contributions to it. Today, the day everybody loves the most, it is Character Creation Day. We're going to talk about how you go about making a character for this. Now, I have, unfortunately, not been able to find an online sort of portal to create characters for this game, but that is really kind of okay because this game is very, very easy to actually create characters in. There's not a whole lot of like crunchiness that goes into it the way that there is in 5e and Pathfinder. So let's go ahead, let's dive in, let's get rolling. The only thing you really need when you are creating a character, when you sit down to create a character rather, is the character sheet and the book. You need the Quickstart guide. You don't necessarily need the actual book. You could use the Quickstart guide, but you don't need necessarily a whole lot of anything. It's a very straightforward character system. It is a single page character sheet, and even that single page is pretty sparsely populated. Whereas when you look at the Pathfinder one, when you look at the D&D one, they are aggressively dense and several pages long. So this is a really, really cool and fun way to go ahead and create characters because you don't have as much math, quite frankly. So basically, there are 5 steps to creating a character for Kids on Bikes. It is laid out right here on page 9, the process overview. And so we're just going to go ahead and we're going to hit each one of those. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it means to do one of those things, and we're going to keep on rolling. Of note, I talked about the power character yesterday. This is not, you don't create the power character. The GM will create the power character. So you are not creating them. You are creating your vessel into the world of the game, not somebody with psychic powers. So first and foremost, the first step on this thing, you select the trope from the playbook and take the appropriate character sheet. You might say, what on earth does that mean? The character creation process of this game has been streamlined down to selecting tropes so that you can just sort of go ahead and pick one and move forward with it. They are, for example, things like the loner weirdo, the stoic professional, brilliant mathlete, that sort of thing. It will help determine your stat dice and streamline some of the choices for you. Alternatively, or they can be found in the playbook, which is available online, or you can go ahead and find them in the back of this book. So if you're running off the Quickstart guide, you will need to go ahead and you'll need to find them either on renegadegamestudios.com or huntersentertainment.com, or if you have the book, it's in the back of the book. It's really, really helpful. So you go ahead and you pick the one that you are most interested in playing. Let me get back here. And it goes ahead and it gives you your stat spread. You don't have to do it this way. You are more than welcome to just go ahead and create your own character from scratch. This is a nice first step to just sort of get you moving. If you don't want to create this way by selecting a trope, because you have things like Brilliant Mathlete, where you are age, it gives you your age, your dice spread, and then some maybe strength, likely flaws, and then a couple of questions. If you don't want to just build off of one of these things, you can sit down and just go, all right, I want to be a teenager, and I want my stats to be set up in this way, and then you can just sort of go from there. But they have a lot of the actual, like, possibilities laid out in the back of this here book, because we've got, what is it here, 6 pages of possible tropes. So you're going to hit a lot of them in this book. So scan through them, see if there's one you like. If not, you are welcome to just go ahead and build your own, because again, the only things you actually need to decide on are your age and your dice. That is what your trope gives you. It then gives you some maybe stuff that you can choose from, or stuff you can decide to ignore and go with on your own. From selecting that, you go ahead and you select your age, strengths, flaws, and first name. So, again, the only thing this really gives you is your dice and maybe your age. For example, blue collar worker, it says your age is adult. However, you could very easily be a teenager who's working construction or something like that. You don't necessarily have to do that. Now, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense for you to be a child who's a blue collar worker, but I could also see arguments made for it. Work with your GM to figure out what is going to work best for you. So you go ahead and you pick your age first, then you pick your strengths and your flaws. This is really where you get into your, basically, your number crunchy bits. So we'll start with flaws because flaws are a lot easier to actually cover real quick because they are narrative things instead of mechanical things. Flaws are things that usually are associated with your trope. They are listed out in there as suggestions. You don't have to take them. Like, again, if you're blue collar worker, likely flaws: blunt, boastful, disloyal, disobedient, dogmatic, envious, greedy, ignorant, prejudiced, reckless, slovenly, and superstitious. You start with 2 flaws, regardless of who you are. So you pick 2 out of that list, or you pick 2 of the other ones. Again, these are just for flavor more than anything else. It is to help inform you of how to play your character. They don't have mechanical impacts necessarily, but in having a flawed character, it makes it a more interesting character. I have talked about this forever. I will continue to talk about it forever. Having characters who are bad at things makes them more interesting than characters who are just good at everything. You then, at the same time, pick your strengths. This is where you actually have some like real mechanics to work with here. So if we flip back to page 59 and we look at the strengths, you start the game with 2 strengths. As part of your age, you will be given one of the strengths outright, and then you'll pick another one. Or you don't necessarily have to be given one of the strengths outright. One of the nice things about this book is that this game is that it's so flexible, and you can really sort of go, I don't want that, I want this instead. So there is a 2-page thing of strengths here for you to go ahead and pick from, and they give you any kind of, or a whole different slew of things that you could do. For example, if you are easygoing, you gain 2 adversity tokens if you fail instead of 1. If you are heroic, you don't need the GM's permission to spend adversity tokens to ignore fear. If you're loyal, each of your adversity tokens you spend to help your friends is a +2 instead of a +1, etc., etc. You get things that obviously impact adversity tokens. You get things that allow you to add just static modifiers when you're rolling for stuff. There is a whole like slew of them in here for you to actually work with and be able to customize your character down to what you actually want it to be, which is really, really great. Your first name is your first name. That doesn't have any mechanical impact either. You pick what you want to be. If I wanted to be called Jameson, then my name would be Jameson. It is like just picking your name for your character. That's all it is. Then step 3 here is introduce your character to the rest of the group. Presumably, you will be doing this with sort of the group that you're going to be playing with so that you guys can establish relationships, because there is not quite so much you meet in a tavern with this, because this is sort of set more in small town. The idea is that it's set more in small town. It doesn't have to be, but the idea is that you all know each other ahead of time, because realistically, a random adult is not going to be walking up to a random kid to start a weird, like, horror-ish adventure. They don't have to be horror-ish, but if you're basing it on Stranger Things concept, horror-esque adventure, it's just not going to happen. So the idea is that you kind of know each other ahead of time. Number 4, you answer questions about your character's relationship with the other characters in the game. This is why you want to actually introduce to the characters around the table, because you want to have these relationships established so that it makes sense as to why you guys are even interacting with each other. Because again, an 8-year-old needs to have a reason to talk to the 17-year-old who lives down the street or something like that. And it could just be that they live down the street and they've known each other since the 8-year-old was born. Period. You're done. That is plenty right there. You don't have to have this really well-established connection, but it is helpful to know how you know each other. And then 5, complete the finishing touches of your character. Great, we made it to the end already. Motivations, fears, backpack, last name, trope-specific questions. So motivations and fears are things that drive you and things that make you afraid. Fear is actually something that is well hit on in this game because of the fact that so much of it can come down to being fear-based. You are not necessarily going to have a lot of, hard mechanics for fear, but a lot of it is playing on the idea that your characters are afraid of something, and then you are trying to overcome that fear. An example they give in here is if you're afraid of dogs, you're going to actively be avoiding dogs at different points in the game, and it might be something that the GM can use to like put your character in a tougher spot that they then need to rely on the people around them to actually help them out of. Your backpack, which is in my mind one of the coolest parts of the game. You basically just pack your backpack with what you want. There can be restrictions put on it. The GMs can remove all restrictions. It is up to them. But your backpack is just where you put stuff that you have with you. Like, you want a flashlight? Put a flashlight in your backpack. You want granola bars? Put granola bars in your backpack. Yes, you can walk up to the table and say, I have a gun in my backpack. But that kind of defeats some of the purpose of this, of being a child or a teenager. And maybe it makes more sense if you're like an adult or something like that, but you are not necessarily going to have every tool for every job. It's why you have it written down next to you, and you have to then be creative with how you actually go about interacting with those things and utilizing them to make your life a little bit easier or more interesting. You pick your last name. It's your character last name. Maybe it's associated with something in town, maybe it's not. Up to you, but it is your last name. And then you answer your trope-specific questions, which again are listed out in the actual tropes. If there are no, if you have decided to forego this and you are going at it alone, you just have to come up with 2 questions, or your GM needs to ask you 2 questions that basically sort of dig into the type of character you are. So let's look at the blue collar worker again as the example. Question number 1 is, to what extent do you enjoy the work you do? Like, you're a blue collar worker. Do you actually like what you do, or do you sort of resent it? Like, what is the feeling there? And question 2, what would it mean for you if you lost your job? Like, you're doing this job. Is it because you like doing it and you want to do it, or is it because you need to do it and it was what was available for you, and anywhere in between? So make sure that you have sort of these directive questions in your head as well, so that you can keep your character straight in your brain. Because it's easy to slip when there is not, a 4-page character sheet with like a 15-page backstory and all of that, like you might have with 5e and Pathfinder and that sort of thing. So make sure you are using all of the little bits and pieces of your character sheet to the best of your ability. But that is, honest to God, that is how you build a character. I know that I sort of like wandered around it a little bit in that, but it is a 5-step process, and those 5 steps are really not that complicated. Again, we had things listed in the steps like pick your first and last name. So you're not necessarily going to be doing anything super complicated. And if you will notice, I didn't roll any dice. I didn't talk about rolling any dice. You don't need to roll any dice for your character. You literally just need the character sheet, and you need a pencil or pen or whatever to write stuff down. I wouldn't write with a pen, but that's just me. So it's a really simple process. They have made the game intentionally easy to pick up and play. That's just the way they did it. So yeah, so that is character creation. Tomorrow we were talking about how, or the things you need to run the game. It's probably going to be a shorter episode just because of the nature of the game. Because most of this is about characters and stuff like that. So anyway, that is everything I have to talk to you guys about today. So thank you so very much for making me part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much in particular to my subscribers. You guys are the ones that make this show possible. If you want to support the show, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube. If you are watching, or not watching, if you're listening on a podcasting platform, subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. It really helps me out. It is the best way for you to directly support the show. But that is everything I have for you guys. So with all that said, don't forget, everybody, drink tea, play TTRPGs, and keep on rolling.